Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Magicians. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, let's start off with Katie and Fog. I am telling you, this season is nuts because we got Alice and Elliot. Now we got Fog and Katie. It's like, these are pairings we've never gotten before in the entire show. And it's like, we're getting them. And I'm like, what? Because that was so interesting because obviously she was at a meeting. I was like, at first I was like, wait, you're spilling all this magic stuff? Are you going to end up erasing everyone's memories? But it's like, well, of course there would be like a Magicians Addicts Anonymous. So, I mean, it would make sense. But I was like, oh, that lady was taking such an interest in what Katie was trying to do because basically the only way to most likely the place that the depository got sent to is a world that I think what's he called, like the inferior. Basically, the only way you can get there is basically by dropping acid. But obviously for Katie, that's obviously, you know, being sober. She's been sober a while, but now she's struggling with it. And, you know, obviously she brought up, like, was it last episode, like the whole, her position with the hedge witches. Might have even been the episode before last, but her position with the hedge witches she thought would kind of fix that. But it's like she was kind of looking for an excuse. She felt relieved not to have to kind of keep up that sobriety. But the fact of the matter is, the lady turns out to be Fog. I did not see that coming. I was like, are you going to reveal yourself to be like a god or something? And it's like, nope, Fog. I was like, he's like, well, I take the whole anonymous angle serious. And obviously he's like, yeah, I've been sober for this amount of hours, this amount of minutes, and just like every excruciating. So, and it makes sense because these are two characters who struggle with addiction. And obviously, you know, Fog doesn't want her to go through it with it because for him it's like, you know, and he even ends up taking it because I think for him it's like, because I think in a way Fog is making up for the fact is because like it's not just Julia he ended up letting down. He kind of feels like, I mean, he let down a lot of his students, especially Katie. But that's the thing, like Katie hasn't, like I'm trying to remember, like, I mean, especially an entire episode together like this, they've never had that. But like, obviously, Fog and Katie have had very few interactions over the course of the series. But I think it's just because, like, similar to the Julia thing, he kind of feels bad because it's like, well, you're kind of one of my students. I mean, granted, you were there under different circumstances, but the fact of the matter is you were one of my students, and he kind of feels like, I haven't really been, you know, the best role model. I never kind of have it, at least over the course of the series. So he's trying to make up for it now. And I love it. And she's like, you shouldn't have done it. He's like, I'm an alcoholic, not an addict. There's a difference. It's like addiction's addiction, dude. But obviously he was, you know, cutting hairs and semantics. So it's like, all right, I'll go look for the depository. But Katie's like, no, you're not going to do it on your own. And they proceed to have like an acid trip of an episode. Everything bright and colorful. It's trippy. And I love even one point, Falcon's like, oh, so that's what my neck feels like when Katie took off the tie. She ties it around him. It's like, oh. I mean, they're literally chasing a brown bunny. Which, weirdly enough, the only thing that comes to my mind is that movie Brown Bunny. Like, when I hear that, that's legitimately the first thing that comes to my mind. But nevertheless, it's literally, I mean, I guess it's supposed to be representative of kind of Alice going down the rabbit hole to Wonderland, you know, type of situation. So, everything's bright and beautiful. I wonder what the hell that cotton candy was that they were eating, because he was like, oh, it tastes like charcoal and hamburgers and this and that. I'm like, is that really within this world that you're eating that cotton candy, or were you eating something in the real world that in this world it looked like cotton candy? Nevertheless, I also love that bit about like, oh yeah, when you lose socks, this is actually where it ends up. And he's like, so if you see a certain sock, you know, because I love when things make that lore that like, oh, when you lose stuff, it actually goes to another place. I forgot what that I don't think it was Halloween Town. I think it was Don't Look Under Your Bed. It was like a Disney movie. I mean, I don't know if it was originally a Disney movie. It's actually one of my favorite like classic Disney movies. I haven't seen it in a long time. But it's about like boogeyman or boogie persons type of situation. And like once you when you lose stuff, it ends up in a specific area. And if stuff get lost there, it disappears forever type of situation. So it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. And luckily they were able to find Fog's, you know, sock. And it's like, hey, at least, you know, small victories. But then it's like, all right, they make their way over to the Emperor, and he's like, yo, when you came here, I read your thoughts, and you both, oh man, you both so cool, and everything. And he's like, all right, but also, you know, sadly, even though this is a cool, mellow place, there's still a price to pay. So one of you has to stay, it's the price. And obviously they're both, great for this place. And as the Emperor says, in other terms, you're both so fucked up, you'd be perfect for this place. But Fogg is the one suggesting he should stay. Katie's like, no, I should be the one to stay because I dragged you into this. But there's a fraction of Katie that feels responsible feels a responsibility to the hedge witches, despite her high and everything, even because it's like, as long as you stay in this world, you will perpetually stay high. The high never goes away. But the fact of the matter is, for Katie, it's like there's that smidge of responsibility. She might feel like, she feels like she's, trying to pull away from those responsibilities, but there's still, even in this high, there's still that part of her that's still like, I got a responsibility to the hedge witches. I have to help them, And obviously, because of that, the Emperor's like, you're probably going to kill the vibe in about 100 years or so you kind of have to go. And for, it's also the thing of, Fogg has literally lived 40 different lives. He remembers all of them, and it just, for him, I think this is kind of like once again, in the grand scheme of things, he won't say this. Well, he didn't really necessarily say it, but I think it is also just kind of like, he's like, I'm tired of all my students and stuff like that. But also, it's like, I think you're trying to make up for just all the mistakes you have. Granted, when you've lived 40 different lives, when you've remembered all of those lives, it's going to take, that the fact of the matter, it's going to, make him what he was. Fogg was never, who knows? Fogg probably, with the first timeline, who's to say Fogg wasn't actually a good person? It wasn't just till the timeline's over and over and over and over again that he became who he is. So much stuff went down. So Katie's promising to come back. I wonder will she have to pay a price then, or I'm curious. Not unless it's a thing of she relieved. Once it's all said and done, she plans on going back, and it's like Fogg gets to leave, I'll stay. We'll see if that ends up being the case. But Katie does learn about where the depository is. It's in Hell's Kitchen, interestingly enough. Obviously, because my brain, I immediately go, Daredevil. It's so ingrained in my mind that that's immediately where my mind goes. So it's like, I don't ever think about Hell's Kitchen, the real place. I think of Hell's Kitchen, the fictional version that Daredevil lives in. Which, to be fair, it's based on the real city, but, the real section of New York. I don't know if that's, because I don't know how, New York is sectioned up, block, place, whatever fact may be. So there's that side of things. Then there's everything with the Dark King. I think is really interesting, where the Dark King, obviously the Centaurians and everything, and Elliot's playing his role of my Dark King, I didn't know who you were. He's like, but for him it's the whole thing of I didn't have to keep up the pretenses, and it felt good. It felt good to not have to worry about being a king, because once people know you're king, they look at you differently and treat you differently. And obviously Elliot subtly knows about that heavy is the weight of the crown. Which, side note, I think that's incredible that they don't know what Margot and Elliot look like. Granted, it's been 300 years, but to be fair, it's kind of like history. We don't know 100% of what people necessarily 100% look like 300 years ago. We have pictures, but those might not necessarily be 100% accurate. They might be an artist's interpretation. That's a whole thing. We get a rough idea what someone looks like. Or maybe no one ever, because I'm trying to think, has there ever been pictures of Elliot painted? Or him, Fargo, I said Fargo, jeez, I'm sorry, Margot, Jesus. So I'm curious about that. That's why I'm just kind of interested. But part of me also wonders, does he secretly know and he's just not saying anything? I don't think so. I think he just, like I said, not unless everything related to Margot and Elliot, and more in particular, Margot got burned. So, because for one, no one recognized Finn or Josh either. So that's kind of the thing as well. But regardless of all of that, now, Elliot's actually getting close to the king. And you see a real difference in his demeanor. I don't know if Margot necessarily caught up on it. I kind of noticed it. He seems a lot chippier this episode. Because obviously he's been very melancholy previously, but because of that cathartic episode him and Alice had last episode, I think he's so much better about this Quentin thing. So I think that's what you're kind of feeling. So, but he seemed in a much better mood and place. What was interesting though is we find out that basically the Dark King has these little essentially televisions. They're magical warders, so basically everyone around the kingdom can look at his exploits as he saves the day. And I love Margot being so it's like Fox News. And I love the Centurion's Fox, you should never listen to them. They lie all the time. And it's stab, stab, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. That was funny. But nevertheless, so they're going out and stuff like that. And then like at one point the Dark King ran away, but I love Elliot being like, no, that's a classic King move. No, not many people know about that. I even love him being like, this is better. What was it? I think he said like, what was it? It's kind of like fuck Netflix. This is better than television or something like that. But what's interesting though is when the Dark King shows up and he attacks those creatures, I just noticed, I was like, that's literally I just feel like it would look a little differently. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I was like, that just seems a little too like, oh, you're there and you knocked them all back and they just die immediately the way they do. I'm like, they died literally the same way. Literally, some of them fell in the exact same position as when he saved Elliot last episode. So that's why I'm like, and immediately in my mind, I'm like, and the way he's so exhausted after, I'm like, are you doubling up? Are you creating these takers so that you can be glorious? Because everyone's always watching you. So, and the way he said, I forgot what it was he said. He said something interesting. It's like, what do they say in the military? He says something to Elliot. I forgot what the exact wording is. But it made me go like, you're faking all of this. You want people's like recognition and stuff like that. Like maybe back in the day he actually did take out the takers, but he needs a threat that people need him for. So he is a magician, so he's creating threats so that he can save the day. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm feeling. We'll see whether that ends up being the case or not. Because there's even that thing at the very end where Margot ends up, like, they go inside that cabin because they're supposed to be, like, getting these map makers and saving them and stuff. But then, like, there's a fairy underneath, and it's like, is that the fairy? That's not this, because I was about to say, because it's like, oh, do you know this person? It's like, no. But I guess it's like the fairy recognized Margot because she sees Margot's, like, fairy eye, and it's like, wait, something's not right about you. But not unless it's that, I'm blanking, it's that fairy they met like in season 3, the one that worked for, what was her name? I'm blanking. It's the McAllister, Irene, like, because there was that one in particular that Julia and Finn had gotten close to. So I was like, so what's up with fairies? Like, so are fairies kind of like, why are they being captured? Because like things were supposed to be good between Fillory and the fairies. So like, what happened there? Like, are you kind of doing? Is the McAllister thing still kind of going on? Because once again, that's a storyline we've yet to circle back to. And I'm a freaking idiot. He's a McAllister, isn't he? Because they made a point when he talked about his past, like, oh, like he was connected to like, you know, oh, like his family wasn't from like Fillory, they're from Earth. I'm like, it's because it was a storyline I kept being like, the McAllisters never popped up last season at all. So I was like, that's still out there in the wind. I'm still surprised they're not gunning for your heads because you all kind of ruined everything, especially because that was a concern. Like, oh, if they came out of hiding and destroyed their secret identities, that basically they'd be out and McAllisters would be coming after them. But it's like, wait, is that who he is? He's actually a McAllister, isn't he? Dude, that'd be crazy if that is, and it makes sense if that's the case, especially because, like I said, putting two together, the McAllisters had fairies captured, so, and because they would also use fairy dust as a means of, you know, as a means of magic, at least, you know, so even with magic back, this could make him stronger. So maybe that's how he was able to take out the takers originally, and now he wants to keep up the pretense, and he still needs a lot of magic to make it happen. So maybe he kind of does the good old McAllister way and grind up fairies into fairy dust to amplify your magic. Like I said, it was back then when they didn't have magic, but now it might be a means of making sure they're able to do it. I mean, because, you know, that's what I'm thinking. So I think this is about to get blown wide open. This is where my mindset is. We'll have to wait and see, but this is what I'm thinking, that he is a McAllister, and that's where the fairies come into place here. And I was like, oh, that's definitely going to be interesting to see where that ends up going. So there's that. And also because the fact is that they made sure not to keep recording, because even Elliot was like, oh, that's a little anticlimactic. I was kind of expecting him to give like a roaring speech or something like that, but it never happened because I want to cut away from all the action because, you know, don't want any witnesses to what he's really up to and stuff like that. So there's that side of things. Then there's the other side of things with Julia and Penny and Alice. Also, side note, that's kind of really interesting. Like, it's like, all right, don't worry. Like, I'm gonna go to, like, Alice is like, I'm gonna go to the library and look up this harmonic convergence. I'll find any books in the library about it. And when Alice left, they hugged. I was like, holy shit. I mean, to be fair, they're like two of the three people who are going to miss Quentin the most. Like, his death affected them the most. So I think because of that, they haven't always been like the closest, especially after season 3. They definitely weren't the closest. Obviously, that there was residuals of that, obviously, in season 4. But I think over losing Quentin, it actually brought them closer together. And I was like, oh, that's actually kind of a neat look. It's like only like 30 seconds, but that scene in itself speaks volumes. I thought that was kind of neat. I was like, huh. Because that never happens, and it's like, oh, it stuck out to me like that. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. So we'll focus on Julia's side of things, because obviously Penny's got to deal with his whole thing, which we'll circle back to in a second. But Julia's thought was to kind of summon up a god who can deal with this harmonic convergence. Side note, I didn't look into it, but I need to look into it. That actress who plays that goddess, she seems so damn familiar. Because, like, her face, like, when I was just looking at her face, I was like, I know you somewhere. I hate when I recognize an actor and I can't place him. I was like, where the hell do I know you from? It's going to bother me. So I definitely need to look into that, because it's going to bother me probably more so, because I'm like, it's on the tip of my tongue of what I feel like I know her from. I'm most likely I'm mistaking her for another actress, but she looks so damn familiar. It's crazy. But nevertheless, she summons up this goddess, and it's just like, ugh. Because even Penny was kind of like, do you really want to do that? Like, your experiences with gods, to be fair, not just yours, it's our experience with gods in general. Most gods are assholes. Turns out she's kind of no different. Well, it's like, oh, I can help you with this situation, but I'm going to need your help. I want to become human, which is interesting. Because so many gods, in particular, what was it, Iris, last season gave her so much shit, because it's like, oh, you can't do anything because you're not a goddess, but you're not a human. You're something almost disgustingly in between, and it's just like, ugh. To be fair, Iris sucks anyway. I don't know, she wasn't that great of a person. It's like, oh, she was fine and dandy with Julia when Julia was a goddess. It's like, oh, but the moment things change, it's like, gods are, to be fair, we learned last season, not all of them were gods. They were actually, I'm surprised the gods were so okay with that. Like, I guess they stayed under the radar, but it's like, that was never really answered to, like, why the old gods were so fine with that. Librarians becoming gods. But I guess it's because through the means that they became gods, it's kind of like, we don't care too much. So do whatever you want to. Who cares? But nevertheless, it is an interesting situation of, it's like, yeah, she's like essentially, what is it, the goddess of, like, music or something like that, and it's like she can recognize what's good and bad somewhat, but the fact of the matter is they can't really appreciate it, because that's the thing about being human. You can really feel, you can enjoy things. Gods are just kind of like, bleh. Things are things. It's just you don't feel any way. You don't feel one way or the other, and she wants to feel something. So, which is interesting, because I was like, huh. So it's kind of the I just think that's so interesting, like a god wanting to become a human. That's so interesting. Considering the fact is there were librarians who became gods, so that's a fascinating situation all on its own. But then, like, Julia turns to the binder, and I was like, oh, weren't you supposed to destroy him? And he makes reference to, like, oh, the fact is you didn't destroy me. And she's like, well, we were both not in a good place, so, want to give you time to maybe you can find, some, maybe a change of mind. So there's that whole situation. So that whole thing went down, but Penny's situation got worse, because what he was doing before was blocking the signal, but he still got hit by the reverb. So he tried to make a new patch. Still didn't work, because he ends up teleporting. He ends up traveling somewhere, but he doesn't remember where. He comes back super messed up, and the signal's starting to kill him. Now it's a situation of like, okay, so only have you have two choices, Julia. With what you're offering me, you get one miracle. Once again, all gods are dicks in this universe. They've made that apparently clear. The only somewhat decent ones we've seen is Hades and Persephone. And Persephone's whole thing was kind of complicated because of the whole radar thing. But the fact of the matter is, Hades, he popped up once, and we don't know in a grand scale of things like what that necessarily, means. So we'll have to, kind of wait and see, on that front, if he ever pops up again. But it's just like, she's like, yeah, I can offer you one miracle. And it's like, she's like, yeah, Penny's got one. She's like, as a god, maybe these are moments like this where I wish I could be human. But Julia's like, no, you're making this choice. She's like, actually, it's your choice. It's like, you're getting so caught up in the damn semantics. It's like, but we need restrictions. Like all the stuff humans ask, it's like, oh, shut up. She's literally, but it's like, don't pretend like you care. The gods don't care about what happens to Earth. It's like, Earth just gets destroyed? Who cares? You guys don't care. It's not going to affect you one bit. I mean, it would because, like, well, the people who pray to you, but I guess it's like, well, there's a multiverse and everything, so, like, who cares, right? But, Julia makes this sacrifice of, saving the world so she can save Penny. And even I, at the time, was like, because at the time I was like, oh, this is interesting. Literally, it's the opposite of the choice Penny had to make last season. And they bring it up because even Penny is like, oh, it's ironic. And it's like, I had to make a choice for you. You had to make a choice for me. And then like she's like, yeah, I'm glad this all kind of worked out and everything. And Julia was like, you know what? Go fuck yourself. Because it's like, once again, it's like, never get mixed up with gods in this universe. They suck so much. But now it's like, but Penny doesn't have his powers. He can't hear people's thoughts anymore. So it's like, oh, for the first time it's quiet. But because of that, he still can travel, but because without his ability, I guess because like I never realized that's how his powers worked. I guess his power his powers made it so that he could basically kind of map out where exactly he wants to go, because now it's like basically his power gave him GPS, and now if he traveled, he'd be traveling without GPS, so it'd be extremely dangerous. So it's essentially like he can't travel anymore. I mean, granted, no one using you as, an Uber anymore, but to be fair, like, when the time comes that is desperately needed for you to travel, that's going to turn into a whole complicated thing. So we'll just have to find another way. And then it turns out Mira ends up being like, oh, I'm a plum. Mira chat with him like, wait, what? Whose kid are you? Or, I mean, rather, whose descendant are you? What? Well, which is so interesting because obviously we met, oh, God. I always go back Jane, because in my head I always want to say Eliza, but Eliza was her fake identity in this timeline. But Jane, obviously she can't be Jane's kid, can she? Not unless Jane did have a kid. I mean, because we know she's stuck in that time loop, but when she was in this time period, not unless she had a kid at some point in time, not unless one of the others had a kid. And that's where my mindset is immediately. So I'm like, what was that? But the fact that she has a first name Plum made me go, I was like, no. I was wondering if it had anything to do with the author. I was like, does that mean anything? Probably not. But it's like, she's a Chatwin. I was like, that's interesting because there's literally no other Chatwins kind of rolling around. So it's like, where have you been? And she's like, if I had told you the truth from the beginning, it's like, well, why did you hide your identity? Especially maybe she didn't know who this group is. I mean, like, it's one of those things that like, man, Quentin, like, it's one of those sad things that makes you think, like, Quentin would be losing his goddamn mind right now meeting a Chatwin. I mean, granted, he's met, Jane, well, at the time he didn't, because obviously later on when he met her, you're Jane, he didn't find out she was Jane Chatwin until after she had died, but before he ended up meeting her, because obviously she's in that space where, like, she's stuck, protected in that time, and you get what I'm trying to say. So it's just interesting on that front. And it's like, okay, so what's that about? So for her, she's trying to deal with this signal on her own. It's like, if you take off that patch, you don't know what's going to happen. She's like, yeah, you're right. And I'm like, what the hell is that going to turn into? Like, what is that setting up? And what's this whole signal thing? And are the Chatwins cursed? Because it does seem like, okay, I was about to say, not unless it's Martin's kid? Did him and someone else bang or something? Because I was like, that just kind of made me wonder. I don't know. Well, for her to be a traveler and stuff like that, because wouldn't traveling kind of be hereditary? I mean, is it hereditary? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just kind of like roll of the dice, just like anyone else's specialty. Maybe being a traveler is just kind of like, oh, maybe you're a traveler, maybe you're not. Maybe it's not a hereditary thing, because I know Martin wasn't one, so it made me think like, I don't know, that's what I'm wondering. I was like, because obviously the signal thing kind of originated with the Beast and everything like that, kind of. So it's like, that's why I'm kind of bringing some correlation to that. We'll ultimately have to wait and see. But on the other side of things, Alice goes to the library. The library seems like it's been ransacked. And then there's people who showed up, because I noticed his name at the top of the listings. It was David Andrews. I was like, yo! He plays one of the Visigoths. In fact, the leader of the Visigoths, Terrence. If you don't know who David Andrews is, obviously one thing, I'm blanking on his character's name, but he was in Heroes. the TV show, and probably most recently the thing, at least I best know him for, that, you know, other people might know him for, is Blaine from iZombie. I was like, yo, David Anders, awesome. But it's interesting because, like, they're barbarians, but they're actually super intelligent and stuff like that. And it's like, even Alice been like, that doesn't make any, okay. Just because obviously it kind of contradicts the word a little bit. Luckily enough, she ran into Zelda. I'm like, Zelda, we haven't seen you so far. I was like, oh, I was wondering where Zelda was at, because she kind of seemed like she took a sabbatical. But then I was like, okay. But she's trying to protect the library because, like, this is kind of like the Visigoths thing. They basically, like, at like moments in history where things are really going to shit, like, they pop up. And basically they're here to raid the library, in particular the books about everything and everyone. So basically, and the way Zelda's saying, like, basically because of that, they can cause the most kind of chaos, because they kind of absorb knowledge, which kind of, interestingly enough, kind of makes them similar to the librarians. I mean, that was like Everett's whole thing of, like, oh, us never being able to have the full knowledge of everything until we became gods, that whole situation. But it's very similar in that regard. But when the time came, like, Zelda was like, all right, Alice, you get out of here. I can't leave. Because for her, she sacrificed so much for the library. She gave up. She wasn't a good, she felt like if she could go back, she'd undo it all. She'd be a better mother and a better friend. And she was neither one, because she gave the library her everything. This was her baby. This was her everything. So she felt like without it, she'd have nothing. But Alice was like, no, like, she knows what you're going through. You don't want to losing something that's so important to you. She's like, you know, because obviously she's going through that with Quentin, but obviously Zelda's like, it's different. It's like, no, it's not. The thing that you love and care about the most, even if it's always with you, you know? So the fact of the matter is kind of being like, there is more out there for you, Zelda, not just this. So, and I love that they actually, the Goths had broken through, and it's like, she's like, I hope you're quick readers. I was like, what's going on? And she, like, lights, you know, that had to kill her. Burning the library. Granted, they still got some books, but at least they didn't get everyone else's books, because the way she was saying is, like, basically, like, if someone, like, was on their way to making a masterpiece, they could go get to that person before they make said masterpiece. But it's like, it does make you want, I mean, to be fair, I don't know if that necessarily changes anything. Even if you destroy people's books, their lives are still going to play out. There's just not going to be any record of knowing, like, how people's lives are going to play out. That's so interesting, because that's an element that's been in a part of this show since the beginning, and for that to be gone now seems so wild in the long run, you know? At least, you know, that's how I see it. Like I said, it's been an element. It's been a part of the library. It's been a part of this show for so long. I think that it's gone. But then, like, you know, Penny was like, oh, thank God we have, you know, nothing's predetermined. We have freedom now. And then looks at Zelda, who's kind of a bummed, and is like, yeah, I mean, come on. Yeah, I'm sure, you know, could always use a good rewrite, Zelda. So, and then while that's all happening, it's like, okay, so how do we deal with this harmonic convergence? It's like, well, it's not going to be an easy thing, but all we have to do is move that. It's like, all we have to do is move the fucking moon. Wow. Okay. And Alice is like, well, at least we know where that is. I'm like, how the hell are you going to pull that off? That would take some godlike situation, but it makes you wonder, like, is it going to be that thing of both everything in Fillory plus what's happening on Earth? Because obviously eventually the storylines have a tendency to kind of blur together, because, like, there's, like, multiple things going on. There's all this stuff with the convergence, there's the stuff in Fillory, there's Katie looking after Hedge, which is all, like, happening, but eventually those storylines tend to kind of converge, and so I'm curious to see how they converge into, and in what form, like, what that's going to end up being. And it might be similar to last season when it came to, like, they made the point of, like, everyone around doing the same magic to kind of gather up energy. So maybe it's going to be a similar thing of literally everyone around the world, which obviously that's going to be dangerous because of the convergences, that's going to lead to some issues. So it's like, okay, you know, the spikes in magic obviously are going to lead to issues, so potentially doing that could be catastrophic, but that might be the only means of moving the moon. Granted, the question then becomes like, well, how much of the moon, how much you have to move the moon? Also, moving the moon, that's going to cause some catastrophic stuff on its own anyway, but to be not doing it is going to lead to catastrophic stuff anyway. So it's like, well, because, like, obviously the moon affects so much on Earth, so that's when I'm like, how much do you have to move? And even if you move it a little bit, that's gonna cause some issues at some point, in some shape or form. And there's a give and take with this whole thing. So I'm curious what that's gonna be. It's gonna be really interesting to see where all this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.